Well, good afternoon and welcome to Becoming an Author at Any Age with author Cheril Thomas, hosted by Carroll County Public Library and sponsored by the Carroll County Chapter for the Maryland Writers Association. I'm Dorothy Stoltz with Carroll County Public Library, and my colleague Dottie Wolf is with us today. She and I have coordinated today's wonderful program. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. If you're joining us either by Facebook or YouTube, please go ahead and use the chat to ask questions, share any comments. We'll get to as many as we can today. The recording will be posted to Facebook and YouTube. And now I'd like to introduce Kelly Phillips, who is the president of the Carroll County Chapter for the Maryland Writers Association. Kelly.
Thank you, Dorothy. As Dorothy said, I'm Kelly Phillips, president of the Carroll County Chapter of the Maryland Writers Association. Back in November of 2019, Cheril came and spoke with us at our meeting about her experience in becoming an author. Her talk was full of encouragement, advice, and information to help writers of all ages and experience levels along in their journeys. So I'm very pleased to welcome Cheril back with even more advice and information for us on becoming an author at any age. Cheril, thank you for joining us again today.
Kelly, thank you so much for having me back. I really appreciate it. It's a delight to be able to speak to the Carroll County Chapter again. I want to thank you for your hard work in getting me here, and Dorothy and Dottie and Lisa Picker, too, from Carroll County Library for making it all happen. Well, becoming an author at any age and any stage of life is just something that I am passionate about. For years, I wanted to write, but I didn't. And when I finally did start writing, I wanted to be published, but I wasn't. I'd like to share my story with you today about not writing and not being published because it has a happy ending, and I hope it may help you if you're in a similar problem or predicament with your writing. So I always wanted to be an author. I loved to write. I did well in English and in journalism classes, and I was really sure that when I was ready, I could write a bestseller. Well, I decided in my early 20s that the time had come. It was time to start my writing career. So how did I start? I told everybody I was going to be a writer. I bought some pretty notebooks. I bought some nice pens. And when I was really ready, I went to the rental store and I rented a typewriter because that's how long ago it was. I set up a workstation at the dining room table and I wrote for a week. And at the end of that week, I had 3 single-sided, double-spaced pages, and they were awful. I have always had a bad habit of not reading the directions until it's too late, and I had allowed my impatience and my overblown optimism to ruin what I was trying to do. I took the typewriter back to the rental store. I found another use for the notebooks and the pen, and 20 years went by. Every once in a while, I'd buy a new notebook, I'd buy a nice pen, and I would try to start again, and I'd freeze. Self-doubt would creep in, and it would paralyze me. And looking back at those days, I know why that happened. It happened because I had no clear idea of what I was supposed to do to be a writer. Here's what I thought in my mind whenever I started to try to write. I would hear that I wasn't good enough. I would hear that I had nothing interesting to say. I'd hear, what will people think? And what if I embarrass myself? If any of those negative ideas come to you, I think it comes to all writers. And I let them keep me from being a writer. But I am a voracious reader. And when I would read a good book during those years, I would think, I wish I'd written that. So one day I found the book that inspired me to start my writing career. I don't remember the title. I don't remember the name, but I remember I was on the beach. I had splurged and bought a beach read book, and I could not get through the first chapter. It was so bad. I couldn't believe that somebody had been paid to write that book, and I couldn't believe I had spent my hard-earned money to read that book. Here's what I thought. I can do better than this. So here's my first piece of advice. If you don't think that you have the talent to write a book, find the worst one you can, buy a copy and keep it close. And every time your spirits flag, look at it and go, I can do better than that. Because if you believe you can, you will. So there I was. I was all inspired to finally try again and write my novel. I knew more about writing now because 20 years had gone by. So how did I start? I bought a new notebook, and this time I bought a Lucky pen. And this time when I started writing, I didn't stop. I was working again by then, and the only free time I had to write was on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons for an hour while my son took a Taekwondo class. So in a year, I sat Tuesday and Thursday afternoons in my car and I wrote. And at the end of the year, I had a book. I had done it. I had finished a book. I had written the world's second most awful book, but I had done it. So I was inspired. I wrote another one. It was similarly awful. I wrote a third one. I didn't read the instructions still. I decided that this was now time to find an agent. So I sent out query letters. And that started a parade of rejection letters that absolutely demoralized me. I found other things to do. I got a better job, longer hours, and 15 years went by. So if you have been doing the math on my age, you will know that by this time I'm closing in on 60. And what do I have to show for it but 3 semi-awful books sitting on a shelf in my closet? And every time I saw those books, I would think that I had missed something really important in my life. I was supposed to be a writer, and I wanted to be published. So finally, after nearly half a century of procrastination and lackluster effort, I began in earnest to learn the craft of writing fiction. I accumulated a library on various topics and aspects of writing, particularly mysteries, which is what I wanted to write. I joined online groups, writers groups, and in-person writers groups. I took classes and seminars whenever I could. And while I was doing that, I wrote short stories, not novels, short stories. Why? Because they're short. If you mess up a short story, you've just lost a few pieces of paper. You don't have a 300-page book sitting on your shelf. Also, to write a good short story, you have to have many of the skills that you need to write a novel. So it was a good place to start. And finally, with a short story, your odds of being published are much higher. Although, that didn't happen to me. My short stories were rejected over and over and over again. And then one day, they weren't. I sold 3 of them in 1 month, and I was a published author. In the years after that, I published more short stories. I was commissioned to co-write a serialized murder mystery for Attraction magazine, and that was later turned into a novel. I've also written the first 4 books in my 6-book mystery series set here on the Eastern Shore. I started my own publishing imprint, Tred Avon Press, and now my books are published under my own logo. My start and stop path to being published isn't the way I wanted to do it. I tried every shortcut I could find, and none of them worked. But here is what I learned. On the days when I think my writing is every bit as bad as that awful book that I held on the beach that day, I know that I am still happier as a struggling author than I ever was as a successful procrastinator. I know that I am good enough. I know I can tell a good story, and I care less about what people think about me and a whole lot more about how I can entertain them with my work. So whatever your writing roadblocks are, don't wait for time to cure them. Work around them, blast through them, climb over them, do whatever you have to do to become the author that you want to be. And I am hoping that I can help you a little bit to get there. I want to share some of my favorite writing, publishing tips and tricks and tools. So I think we're going to go to the second slide, and we're going to talk. There you go. That slide has my contact information. And the reason that it's on there is that as we go along, we're going to cover an awful lot of information. And when I get excited, I tend to talk fast. So if you miss something, don't worry. Just send me an email. And that address is easy. It's Cheryl@CherilThomas.com. I will answer your questions, send you any material that you missed, and I will offer you a free story for your trouble. So, when I finally stopped procrastinating and set out to learn how to write the kind of books that I like to read, it was difficult to find the exact information that I wanted to know. Without going down a lot of rabbit holes, start and stop and you get lost and it's difficult. So back in those days and today, I highly value other writers who would share their process with me and share their resources, how they did it, and what tools they used. It was a huge time saver for me, and I hope that's what I can do for you today. The information that I'm going to give you is broken out into two parts. The first part is about writing, and the second part, which is shorter because we could spend all day on it, is about self-publishing. So again, if you miss anything as we go along, just send me an email. Groups such as yours. My first tip is find yourself a writing group. You've already done that. You've found a great one. So they are great sources of fellowship and of skill sharing. A writers group first inspired me to try short story, and I got great encouragement from that. And then later on, another group gave me the confidence and the encouragement I needed to try and get my work published, and I was successful in doing that. So where do you find them? Well, obviously, the Maryland Writers Association is a great resource to find a writing group. You can also, if you are an introvert like me and you'd prefer to do it at home, you can find online writing groups, all kinds of places. Facebook, Twitter, even Pinterest have pages devoted to all genres, subgenres. If you're writing nonfiction, you can find pages on that too. Just be sure that you shop around and find a good fit for you. And if you're like me, be careful and use those resources wisely, because I can go on Pinterest to research book covers, and 20 minutes later, I have 2 casserole recipes and a diet to lose weight in the lockdown. So you do have to be careful when you're using those. Okay. We're going to go to slide 3. And we're going to talk about tips, tricks, and tools for writers. These are my favorites. So first of all, podcasts. I have people tell me I don't have time for podcasts. I don't have time for anything else but podcasts. Why? Because you can take them in small chunks. They are a great way, if again, choosing wisely, you get the ones that can teach you what you need to know, and you can do it at your own speed and your own time. And speaking of speeds, particularly when you get familiar with a podcast, you know how it's set up, how the speaker works. You can turn up the speed. You can do it at time and a half speed or double speed. And when you hear something that you really want to pay attention to, slow it down again. I think they're great. So I'm going to tell you, these are just my top 5 favorites. I never miss the Creative Pen with Joanna Penn. So that is, you can see up there, the creativepen.com website. Joanna is British. She has a lovely accent, a wonderful sense of humor, and she is a very successful thriller writer. She interviews other successful writers. And what I found really helpful about that is one day I was listening to her podcast after I had been listening for quite some time. And all of a sudden, I realized that I felt like I was sitting in the room with two successful writers. So, of course, it's going to rub off. I must be a successful writer, too. That's how I felt. It's a great ego boost. But anyway, go to her website. It is just packed full of information, but she is a fantastic writing coach. She has over 500 episodes of that podcast. They're all on different subjects. They are all searchable on her website, and she has transcripts of each of them. For those of you who don't want to actually listen to the podcast, you can read the transcripts. Lots and lots of information and help there, thecreativepen.com. The Self-Publishing Show with Mark Dawson. Now, Mark is an expert on marketing and publishing, but marketing. He's also a prolific writer. So on the podcast, his courses are very good, but they're pricey. In the podcast, you get a lot of the information for free. And it's funny, too. It's a great podcast. Go Publish Yourself by Ingram Spark Publishing. This is a sporadically produced podcast, but it is very informational. They're also very short. These are definitely, they're like 20-minute podcasts. But I enjoy them, and they have lots of good information. The Ask Ally podcast is produced by the Alliance of Independent Authors. Now, this is a large group of professional, independently published authors. The Alliance is, I think, a little pricey to join, but it is well worth it if you are a published author, because they have an arm that is like a Better Business Bureau, and they vet vendors. And when you use one of their vendors, you get great discounts. Last year, I rebranded all of my books, and I had to republish, obviously, all of them. And I saved a lot of money. I saved well more than my dues for the Alliance of Independent Authors. But their podcasts are full of information. They're not as exciting as some of the other podcasts, but they're very good. And then finally, the Six-Figure Author podcasts with Lindsay Baroker, Joe Lallo, and Andrea Pearson. They are all very successful fantasy and post-apocalyptic fiction writers. It's exactly what it says. They make six figures and more, very successful. They have an excellent podcast on writing, genres, self-publishing, and again, three very successful people to learn from. Okay, blogs and newsletters. Slide 4, please. All right, so if you like to read more than you like podcasts, or in my case, I do both, these are some blogs and newsletters that I use on a regular basis. So I try never to miss Kristen Lamb's blog, and you can find her at authorkristenlamb.com. She is an excellent writing coach. Excellent. She also puts out a blog every week that is, it's one of the funniest things you'll read on writing, but they're also very good. Her essays are educational, as I said, extremely funny, and they are spot on. She also gives a lot of classes, and I think they are at full price. They are very reasonable. But whenever she brings out new classes, she retires old classes and she puts them at a deep discount for a little while. And I have taken a number of them, and they are all very, very good. Randy Ingermanson, whose name I always stumble over, is the inventor, if you will, of the snowflake method of writing fiction. And his website is theadvancedfictionwriting.com. It is a wonderful process if you are a stuck writer. When I was trying to write my first standalone or solo novel, I had plots. It had two family generations, 60 years apart, two different sets of characters, because I try never to make anything easy. And I just could not get my head around getting this plot together and getting it on paper. And I found Randy's book, and I tried the snowflake method, and it saved my book. I have used it to draft a book from scratch. I have used it when I was stuck in the middle of a book, and I had what I've seen referred to accurately, I think, as the soggy middle. It's where the middle of the story just won't hold up the ends, the beginning or the end. So I have used his method to fix that type of situation. Since I started writing for real, I have never had writer's block, but I would imagine that his method could unstick any writer. It is well worth purchasing that book and having a look at it. So that's Randy Ingermanson at theadvancedfictionwriting.com. Jane Friedman does a weekly newsletter called The Electric Speed, and you can find it or sign up for it going to janefriedman.com. So The Electric Speed is a curated list of writing blogs and articles that have been published in that week. Which is very useful. Pro Writing Aid is a web-based editing software, which we're going to talk about more under Tools. But they also have a blog, and they do, their staff members write lots of articles on editing, publishing, and they are very good. Now, with blogs like this one by Pro Writing Aid, they're trying to sell you something. I mean, that's just to be expected. So just ignore the sales pitch. I'm sure they appreciate that. Just ignore the sales pitch and look at the material they're offering, because these articles that they put out are very good. And that is at prowritingaid.com. Now, when you want to just relax and be entertained with some writing-based humor, have a look at the Jungle Red Writers, jungleredwriters.com. So this is a group of 7 very well-known, I believe they are all mystery writers, who put out a newsletter that is just very entertaining. Hank Philippi Ryan, Reese Bowen, and Deborah Crombie are just 3 of the authors. They talk about writing, which is always good and very informative. They talk about the writing world, the world in general, and they refer to their newsletter as The View with Bodies. It's a hoot. It's very well worth checking out. So I think we're going to go to slide 5 and talk about books. Excuse me. Okay. When I started, well, actually all the times I started trying to write, and got discouraged. At one point I found Anne Lamott's book, Bird by Bird. Whoops, on the other side, Sherry. Bird by Bird. This book has been around for probably 25 years, and it is, my copy, as you can see, is worn and yellow and much loved. This book is, she says, some instructions on writing and life, and that's exactly what it is. It will make you feel good, and it will give you some great inspirations for your writing. I don't have my copy because I loaned it out, but On Writing by Stephen King. Stephen King is just one of the most talented writers I have ever read, which, you know, everybody knows that. I can't read his fiction like all the way through unless it's the middle of the day and bright sunshine, and I know it's fiction. But Stephen King wrote an autobiography many years ago, and I believe it's been recently updated. But that book is my inspiration, my go-to for inspiration for a kick in the pants, a refresher course on why not to use adverbs. But anybody who thinks that their life is that they're in a position that they can't possibly write needs to read that book. And when Stephen King comes back from being hit by a car, and is recovering and starts to write again. Wow. Well, if he can do it, what excuse do we have? So that is one book that I own in hardback, audio, and ebook. So another book that you can tell the age. This book is yellowed and the stickies in it have faded. I no longer know what I wrote on them, but I can tell what I wrote in the margins of the book. This is Self-Editing for Fiction Writers, How to Edit Yourself into Print by Rennie Brown and Dave King. It was out many years ago. It is still in print, and it is still a jewel. I pick it up, go through it every so often. I picked it up, opened it at random the other day, and it said, "Get rid of adverbs." It was sitting next to Stephen King on the shelf. I'm just saying. So any book that you can find by James Scott Bell is worth the price of admission. James Scott Bell is a writing coach and an author. He is a prolific writing coach. He has a number of books. I have many of them. I tend to buy his books on ebooks, so I can search for the specific topic that I'm looking for. One of my favorites is 27 Fiction Blunders, How Not to Make Them. And he gives great advice. He also does, if you are familiar with the Great Courses, it's a streaming service that you can take classes on anything. James does an outstanding course that is called simply How to Write Best-Selling Fiction. It is 24 lectures, each on a different topic, and they're each about a half hour long. So you can get a subscription to Great Courses. I took it for a month just to take this course. But also, if you have a subscription to Audible, this course is in an ebook that you can get for 1 credit, and wow, what a value. It's amazing. So another book, Take Off Your Pants by Libby Hawker. Libby Hawker is she writes historical fiction, and I don't generally read much of that, but I love her books. They are wonderful, particularly the ones about old Egypt. And Take Off Your Pants, what she's talking about is how the pantser version of writing, where you just write by the seat of your pants, versus the plotting method of writing, where you do outlines, and she blends the two. And it is it's a great book. She has a step-by-step process that she distilled it down to. I copied that and put it with my format that I use when I start to draft a book. After that, we're back to how to write a novel using the snowflake method. And I'm looking, did I put that? Yeah, that's the last one on there. I think I've got my books out of order, but we'll go ahead and talk about that. This is Randy Ingermanson again, and this is his book, How to Write a Novel Using the Snowflake Method. I wanted to show you these books because you can see that I really do use these. This is great, but that is the book that I was talking about earlier. Joanna Penn, who we were also talking about earlier. These are just 3 of the books that she puts out. This one, I believe, the Successful Self-Publisher or Successful Self-Publishing is, I believe, the one that is always free on her website, and it's available on Amazon for free. So there you go. Those are Joanna Penn's. These I have probably read more often: The Successful Author Mindset, Successful Self-Publishing, and How to Make a Living with Your Writing. And then I'm going to go back up to Rachel Aaron's 2,000 to 10,000. People, she's talking about going from 2,000 words a day to 10,000 words a day. That is never going to happen in my house. But this book is just packed full of very interesting advice and techniques that I was able to use to speed up my writing. It's about organization. And what I found is most of these books that are written to tell you how to write faster, they all start with being organized and knowing what you're going to write when you sit down, which is good advice. Rachel actually tells you how she does it. So it is a very good value. Books on writing are the only kind of books that I will deface. You saw notes in the margin, dog-eared pages, sticky notes. An annotated library on writing is that you have chosen because it speaks to you or it's what you need, is a very valuable thing to have. So let me tell you how I did it on a shoestring. I checked out books from the library, which I did not write in, books from the library to see if I liked them, books on writing. And if they did, if I thought they were a good value, I would go on Amazon and order used copies of them. Sometimes I got lucky and other writers had already made notes in the margin. And so I got the benefit of that too. But that is how you do it. You can also, if you want to buy ebooks or you can't find a book at the library, which I know never happens, you can go on Amazon, of course, and order a free sample of it and try it out. Because some of these books are pricey, but most of them are like Rachel's. They're not very thick and they are usually pretty reasonable. So there. I think that does books. And Dorothy, I think you wanted to stop and see if we had questions, or if we don't have any, I can keep going with favorite writing tools.
Yes, we don't have any questions right now. I did want to just say how much I appreciated your tip on reading a book that isn't very well written, and pep talk, I can do better than that. So that was great.
Well,
So,
that's the truth. That's exactly what happened.
well, great. We'll go on to your next slide then.
Okay. Favorite writing tools. Okay. So things have changed a lot since I wrote my book in the car that time. You can certainly still write your masterpiece by hand if you want to, but at some point you're going to have to get it into print. So if you are a PC user, chances are you use Microsoft Word, which is excellent. Mac users have Pages. There are also third-party word processing programs for writers, and one of the best of these is Scrivener, and Scrivener is what I use. The first 2 books I wrote, I used Microsoft Word, and it was great. But then when I found Scrivener after quite a learning curve, I did have to read the directions on that one. I found it is so useful. It's the definition of what it does is it is a document management system that allows the user to organize notes, concepts, research, and whole documents for easy access and reference. That was from Wikipedia. Just in short, what Scrivener does is on the left, we're on my left, the left-hand side of the screen, it has a list of all of the files that you are working on in your project. So for me, that would be all my chapters, and it would be my research at the bottom, usually my instructions and notes I want to follow at the top. On the right-hand side, another narrow pane is a small pane for taking notes. So if you're writing along and you want to remember that your character has a sister, we'll say, you can just make yourself a note to the right. But one of the most useful things it has is a little pane at the top where you can write a synopsis of the document that you're working on. It might only be a sentence or 2. And why that is so valuable is that when you are working on a very long document like a book, you can print out your synopsis of every single chapter and you can move them around. You can also show those synopses can they have a feature called corkboard where they go onto little replicas of cards, and you can move them around the screen and replace and restructure your book, the chapters in your book. I'm not doing it justice. And the reason I'm not doing it justice is that I only use about 10% of what this software can do. I can't say enough about it. It has a very steep learning curve. So I had to try it twice before I figured out enough of it to use it. But I'm going to tell you a way to do this easier if you want to try. Scrivener is free for the first 30 days. So you get a generous amount of time to decide if it works for you. You can get the free version, which is exactly the same as the paid version. And you can have a look at, there are all sorts of YouTube videos and tutorials online on how to start with it. And if you just get the starting steps, I think you'll be hooked. And really, I never went any further than that. That's all I needed to write my books, and that is all I use. Scrivener has a huge community online. It's very popular with writers. And I have a how-to book for Scrivener over there in the corner. It weighs about 6 pounds. When I have a question, I just Google it, and somebody is right there with the answer. So Scrivener, if you want to try it, give it a try. It may work for you. It may not. It's very affordable. It's under $50. And then all the updates are free. Okay, that is Scrivener. Now, fun, bullet journals. Most of you probably know what a bullet journal is. The formal name is The Bullet Journal Method, Track the Past, Order the Present, and Design the Future. It is a book by writer Carroll, just like Carroll County. And here's the short description. It's a method of organizing information so you can find it again. So I saw this, I believe, one of those times when I was playing on Pinterest instead of working. And I thought it looked so neat, but I didn't want to read a book. We've talked about me not wanting to follow directions. So I Googled how to use it. This is just a shameless ripoff, but I gave the bullet journals credit. You take a spiral notebook. This is a very cheap spiral notebook with a cardboard cover so that I can write on it. You number all of the pages, and then you give each page a line and you number it down the side. When you go to write anything, you give it a title and you enter it on the page here. So I've opened at random. This is way back when I was beginning to draft the outline for the 4th book that I'm just wrapping up right now. So it is entitled Book 4. So there you go. That's how you do that. Then, because this is only on writing, I can look at, all I have to do is read a 2-page index and not the whole index to find what I'm looking for. I take notes on everything. So all of these online classes and whatnot. And by the way, I take free ones. I rarely pay for anything except for James Bell and Kristen Lamb. But I take notes on all of them. And so that's where those notes are. This is another notebook, Book 4, because by that time I had started writing it. And these journals are just a stream of consciousness as I go through writing. It's just a mishmash. If I didn't have that index, I would be in trouble. Writing to-dos. This is the stuff that I have to do, so I have to write it down. And if I put it in any of the other notebooks, I probably wouldn't see it every day. So I have about 8 of those notebooks, and it's wonderful. It is a wonderful way to simplify all the odds and ends and bits and pieces of information that you're going to accumulate as you go through the process of becoming an author, and then when you get into the publishing process, because there's a lot to do with that. All right, Pro Writing Aid and Grammarly. We're going to do those together because they are the same function, so to speak. They are online writing assistants is the way they are billed. This is an artificial intelligence that will edit your work for you. Grammarly has been around longer, and most people are familiar with it. If you have a Gmail account, Google uses Grammarly, and that is the little green, red, or yellow dot that you will see in the corner of your email that tells you that you have typos. A lot of forms that you fill out, Grammarly will be pre-installed, and you will see that. If you write in Microsoft Word, Grammarly has a plugin. I think that goes to the paid version of Grammarly. Both Grammarly and Pro Writing Aid have free versions that you can use. They're web-based. You can use without any cost at all. But they both also have professional versions. I try not to spend any more money than I absolutely have to on my writing. So I'm always looking for something free. And I tried both of them, but I really not only believe that pro writing is better, I think a professional writer needs to have the paid version of whichever writing assistant that you use, just because of the level of expertise. You really want your work to be perfect, if you can, if there is such a thing. And you're going to get a more thorough scrutinizing of your work if you get the paid version. Anyway, back to Grammarly and Microsoft. I wandered there for a minute. If you get Grammarly added to Microsoft Word, and it's very easy to do, then you have like a supercharged spell check and grammar check, and it's a great thing. But I prefer and I use Pro Writing Aid. Why? Because for me, the way it's set up, it works better. And they produce up to 31 different reports on your writing. So I put a chapter in. It comes up, the first thing it tells me, you put a 5-page chapter in and you got 58 errors and you didn't see them. I mean, it had passed spell check and everything else. Well, they're not errors per se always. They are stylistic issues sometimes. Some of us may have a problem with commas. I'm not saying it's me. I'm just saying I'm grateful to Pro Writing Aid. One of the most useful reports for me is one called Echoes and one called Overused Words. So you're writing along, you write a lot, you don't realize subconsciously that you are using certain words a lot. For instance, you would be amazed how many times you can use the word like in 3 pages. When you read it, you don't see it, because your mind is going the way you wrote it, and you don't see that you've used these words over and over again. The Echoes report shows you how often the same word is repeated in relationship to the last time you used it. So while it may not look like you've used the word too many times, you've used it too close. You've used it twice in too close a proximity. And the overused words and phrases is exactly what it looks like. It will start out with the highest number of words in a phrase, and it will say, you use this 5-word phrase twice. And I'm always sure it's wrong, because, I wouldn't do that, but I did that. And then it comes all the way down to one word, and it shows you from the words you use most often, which some of them is fine. You're going to use a, you're going to use the, an, of. Those you're going to skip down. But if you've used the word perplexed 7 times in 2 pages, you want to fix that. So the other thing it does is when you go to fix it, you hover over the word that it's highlighted, and it says perhaps you would like to use, and it suggests a whole list of words that you can put in its place with one click. Another report that I have a love-hate relationship with is something called the sticky word report. And this report tells you which of your sentences have words that you could leave out. I always disagree, but I do take their advice sometimes. You're not going to take every single one of these suggestions. This is artificial intelligence after all, and they do, homonyms are a problem sometimes. And just the type of writing, you can tell it that you're writing fiction or you're writing dialogue, and it's supposed to adjust the way it looks. But their idea of a tone for fiction is a little different from mine, so I don't always take their suggestions. Pro Writing Aid and Grammarly, you should put your work through that as a process before you even send it to an editor for the first time. It will help you get your work as close to perfect as you can get it, because you will be blind to some of the things that you've written, because all of our words are great. So that is those 2. Oh, okay. Microsoft Excel. This is one of my favorites. I was a bookkeeper for many years, and a lot of people use Excel at work, or they put their bank accounts in Excel spreadsheets, and they're great. But you can also use them for your writing. How do you do that? Well, I love a good spreadsheet. I could talk for a long time on the wonders of a spreadsheet. But back to that first book, when I jumped in and I had 2 storylines set 60 years apart with 2 sets of characters. Those characters all had birth and death dates that were important, when they were married, who they married. It was confusing. So if we can see this, whoop, there we go. You might not be able to read it, but again, if you'd like to see what it looks like, send me an email. I'll send it to you. So what this has is, these are the main characters in this row. It has their age in 2016, which is when the story originally takes place. Actually, it ended up being 2018, but it took a while to write. When they were born, when they died, when they were married, their age at marriage. That was a plotting problem at one point. Their age at death. I seem to recall that was also a plotting problem. There's that. Funny story. This is a very simple spreadsheet of characters' names in that book. So I wrote the first draft. I started thinking, I got a lot of characters whose names start with A. Maybe I better make a list of all of these, because I'm forgetting, which names I've already used. One of the best things about being a writer is you get to use all the baby names you always wanted to use and didn't have 46 children. So A through Z down the side, first and last names just across from the letter. Very, very simple. When I first did this sheet, there were no names from M down. Not a single one. But there were about 11 that started with A. So I had to rename a lot of characters, and it was a pain. So now I keep one of these sheets, and I update it periodically as I go through the first draft. Another wonderful aspect of Scrivener, I will jump back to that, is it has a universal tool for replacing words such as character names throughout every document associated with the project with one push. I've used it a lot. Okay, so that is Microsoft Excel. Wonderful. In a Mac, it is numbers, and it does the same thing. Now, you can create your own spreadsheet by hand. I use them to track character arcs. I use them to track storylines in a book. I just recently did this for the book that I am wrapping up right now. It is one of the final things I do before I declare something to be a final draft. And I make sure that all of the plot lines that I started with and the questions in the book I started with, that they make progress throughout the book and that they are tied up at the end. It never fails that there is always at least one that just, it started, it grew, and it disappeared. You can go back and take that one out because it's not integral to the story, or it would have ended up at the bottom. So that's what you use spreadsheets for, and whether you call them spreadsheets or charts on construction paper, whatever it is, it's a very useful tool. All right. We are ready to go to slide 7 and move into publishing unless we need to stop for something. Anything? I don't see any questions. No.
We do have one just about your journaling. Do you take your notebook wherever you go, or if you're out and about and you get an idea, do you jot it down on a small piece of paper and then transfer it to your journal? Is the question.
Yes, I have a notebook of some kind in every purse and tote bag that I carry. I don't take these notebooks out of the house because I lose things, and I would be devastated if I lost one of those. So I don't take them out of the house. I also don't take my laptop because I'm also clumsy, and that's just asking for trouble. So
that's great. Thank you. We can go on to your next slide.
Okay. So slide 7, I amused myself with the title, No Agent, No Publisher, No Problem, because it's true. You can teach yourself the basics of self-publishing. There are all sorts of free resources and products on the market to help you do it. But just like learning how to write fiction or nonfiction or memoir or whatever you're going to write, it's a learning process. And so the same process I followed, got books, I took all sorts of free classes. But this is easier in that if you're going to publish on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and probably many more, have a free process for uploading your books to publish on their platform. I use Amazon, so that's what I'm going to talk about. I've never used Barnes & Noble. It may be just as easy. There are other platforms where you publish your book with them and they do all the work. You have to pay somebody to do that. As we've already mentioned, I'm cheap. I like to do it myself. So we're going to start talking about Amazon. So if you have a manuscript that is ready to go to print, and by ready to go to print, I mean that it has been edited by somebody other than you, and it has been proofed by somebody other than you. My recommendation, again, is that the first money you spend on your business should be on editing and proofreading. Nothing will kill a good book faster than typos. And believe me, you can proof it. You can have 7 other people proof it. You can have a professional proof it, and there are still going to be typos in it. The trick is to have as few as possible. So I use Amazon exclusively for my ebooks because I want them in Kindle Unlimited. And Amazon won't let you publish your ebooks anywhere else if you're going to be in Kindle Unlimited. I also, they also publish my paperback and my large print paperback. I do all my books in 3 formats, the ebook, the paperback, and the large print paperback. But I publish the paperback and the large print paperback also on Ingram Spark. And the reason I do that is because they are a book distributor and they sell to bookstores and to libraries. So my book is available to through those outlets as well. But right now we're going back to when you start, you may only want to start with an ebook. It is the easiest type of format to get published. It is the least expensive format to get published. And so let's talk about that. Amazon will walk you, they have tutorials. They can walk you through the process. What I would recommend is when you think you're ready, do a dry run. If you are afraid that you will confuse it with the final version, put the title in as test or whatever, just to go through the process for the first time, because it can be very intimidating. Well, it was intimidating for me. It may not be for you. They offer a free, so there's 2 parts. Here's simple. There's 2 parts to a book. There's the cover and there's the interior. The interior has to be formatted, and so does the cover. And you need a cover. So you've already got the interior. You have done your manuscript. Now you need a cover. So the first step in Amazon is to upload the interior, and they will format it for you. And sometimes they will come back and say, you have this problem, that problem, another problem. I find formatting ebooks, but particularly print books, is very labor intensive unless you use a professional formatting software. But we're back to when I started and I was doing all this stuff myself. Just keep at it. You will get there. And every time they accept your interior for printing, they will show you what it looks like. They will give you a PDF, and it's exactly what the interior of your book will look like. Here's the bad news. You have to scrutinize every single page, because I can tell you that at the end of the book, if the first part of the book is perfect, there is going to be something wrong near the end of the book, every single page. I actually had one time where they skipped page numbers, 50 of them. The pages weren't missing. The page numbering was off by 50 pages at the end of the book. And I almost didn't catch it. It's very time consuming, but very well worth it. So that is the interior. Then in the exterior, they have a software to make your book cover. They have pre-designed formats, and you can go in and you just say, here's my name, here's the blurb I want on the back if you're doing a paperback, but we're talking about ebooks. Here's the name, and here's my name, and here's the title and the subtitle. And they go, boom. Here it is. Now, there may be another book out there somewhere with the same cover that you have, but it won't have the same title. And you may be thrilled with that. Well, I never know when to leave well enough alone. And I always wanted to do my own cover. So if you were like me, you don't want to spend any money, you don't like the pre-made covers that come from Amazon, or you're just feeling adventurous and you want to create your own, you can find, there are a number of free graphic software programs. Now, that just is a scary thing to think about if you are not a graphic artist. Well, I am anything but I do love to tinker. And I found Canva, C-A-N-V-A, Canva. And it is a wonderful free Obviously, they want you to upgrade to the paid subscription, but even that is so affordable. But the thing is, you don't need the paid prescription for most of what you're going to need to do. So just starting out, I played around with it, and this was the cover I came up with. Now, which way am I going? Here we go. It's okay, but now that I look at it, it looks like I had been on Canva for 5 minutes. But this was the first cover. The next year, I had the second book in the series. I wanted them to look alike, so I redid the cover. And so by this time, you can tell I had learned a few more tricks on Canva, and that's what that cover looks like. So 3 books in, I decided to invest in professionally designed covers because I wanted all of them to look alike. And frankly, I was running out of ideas. So I hired a graphic artist, and this is the final version of Squatters' Rights. I had to laugh the other day. I was on my author page, and one of the annoying things about Amazon, not that I'm annoyed with them, but one of the annoying things is that your books never go away. They never die. So once you've published them, you can unpublish them, but they will always be for sale, and they will always show up. It's possible to buy this still today. But what was so funny was it was about $29. Why would anybody pay that? It was twice what this one cost. I don't know. You think I would get a royalty from that? I don't think so. So anyway, that is doing your covers. Formatting. So Vellum is a book formatting software. Again, you can find others. What I like best about Vellum, well, many things. First of all, it does not take me 25 hours to format the interior of a book anymore. It takes about an hour and a half. It's a beautiful thing. But Vellum integrates with Scrivener, just like Pro Writing Aid integrates with Scrivener. So now I have a cohesive process of integrated software tools, which it really is wonderful. Again, you don't need it to publish your books. It's just very, very useful. So Vellum. So back to what's free on Amazon. This is what the interior of a book formatted. There we go. Formatted by Amazon looks like. There is nothing wrong with it. It looks like every other paperback book that's out there. It looks fine. But this took hours to get the margins just right, to get the numbers just right and the right spacing here. Again, one time I thought I was in the final version, and I looked at it, and the title and my name were all squashed into the center. It's a nightmare. Also, I was all excited over the interior that I was able to do with my print that I found. But when I got Vellum, again, you're looking at this. This looks pretty much like the other, but again, an hour and a half. You put it in, and all of the spacing is done for you. All of the, you don't have any of the sentences that have spaces in between them to make them longer. You don't have any pages with one word on them. Your chapters start on the left-hand side. Well, anyway, they all start on the same side. And this is what the interior page looks like. It is very nice. And this is what the first page of a chapter looks like. It has a nice dropped cat. I've got a little doodad up here There's a technical name for it. Doodad works. I have stylized page breaks that aren't really going to show up real well, but there it is. I couldn't do that. I mean, I'm sure somebody could, but I couldn't do that on Amazon. Now, vellum is pricey. There's no two ways around it. But for me, it was worth it. I wanted all my books to look alike. So that's what I did. So the point of showing you vellum and Scrivener and talking about paid subscriptions to Canva and Pro Writing Aid, the point is that you can publish a book for next to nothing when you're starting out and you're learning. The most important thing is to make sure that your book is as perfect as you can make it, that somebody else has edited it and somebody else has proofed it, because you will go blind to all the errors that are in it. You just won't see it. Your brain skips over it. That's where you put your resources when you're first starting out. And then as you can add the conveniences and the enhancements of these paid tools very slowly. I mean, I added those over 4 years, and I'm happy where I am with that. So I guess that is wrapping it up for me. I have covered a lot of ground. I did leave some out that will be adding into the to the blogs when I post them. So that will be coming up on my website. It'll probably starting in about a week. So there I am, CherilThomas.com. Send me an email, Cheril@CherilThomas.com, if you've got any questions. I would also love to hear what works for you. I may not always read the directions, but I love to hear what other people are doing. And as a final note, the first book in my series is free right now on Amazon, and it's free, I think, through Tuesday. So I would love for you to have a look at it and let me know what you think. And if you want to leave a review, that's great too. So thank you again so much. I have really enjoyed this. It is a pleasure.
Thank you, Cheril, so much. We do have just a couple of questions. One is on, you were talking about how to use an outline, but also how to be, I guess, flexible to changes, or if you're inspired to move in a new direction.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk a little bit about balancing how to use an outline and how to leave room for adaptability for changes?
Sure. So when I started writing, I did not use an outline. I would get an idea and I would sit down and just write. Well, we talked about the book I wrote in the front seat of the car. That, if I could, I prefer that. But what happens is I wander. You may have noticed from the way I talk. And new ideas would occur to me, and I would think, that's great. And my characters always seemed to go in a direction that was different from what I had planned for them. So now what I do, and again, it was a combination of the snowflake method and Libby Hawker's book, Take Your Pants Off. Because if I start out with a very general idea, if I'm lucky, I know who's going to die and how. And if I'm lucky, I know how the main characters are going to end up at the end of the book. I know where I want them to go. They don't always go there. So what I do is I start out, the first thing is a very general outline. It may only have 3 bullet points. This is where they are at the beginning. This is where they are at the middle. And this is where they are at the end. And it never looks like that when it's done. So then I do a very detailed, I have done, 5-10 page outlines. And so I start with those 3 points, and then I start adding thoughts as they occur to me. When I start writing from that outline, it usually all goes horribly wrong immediately. I just take the outline and I add what I changed. And then periodically I will stop. I will redo the outline, and then as it really gets rolling, I just throw the outline away. Because I write in Scrivener and I have this handy dandy synopsis at the end. If you're not writing in Scrivener, then just keep a note card on each chapter as you write it. And when I say synopsis, I'm meaning 2 sentences, 3 sentences. It just reminds me what's going on. So I rush through the first draft. I so badly want to know what happens, so I know what to do with it. The person who starts out that's going to be killed rarely dies. The people who start out to be bad are rarely bad. It just goes all over the place. So an outline does not hamper you at all. You just keep changing it. And then when you get through that first draft, now that's when a serious outline comes in, because you have to be able to make sense of what you've written. And your first draft will not make sense at all. Well, it'll make sense, but it won't flow the way you thought it was going to. And so then you have to write a new one. Well, there's nothing duller than outlining your own work. But if you have kept a synopsis of each chapter as you go along, you're already done. You don't have to go back and rewrite it. Then when you are finished, what you think might be the final draft ready for editing, that's when I go back and I do the spreadsheet that tracks each of the plots. And if I have a lot of characters, I do another one with the characters, and that one is real simple. It's a list of characters across the top, a list of chapters down the side, or vice versa, whichever you like. And every chapter that person appears in, they get a check mark. And you look to see that nobody is all bunched up in a corner over here, has had a lot of action in first act, and by the time you get to act 3, you've never heard from them again. You don't think you're doing that when you're writing the book, because again, you're writing and the ideas are coming, and you're just having such a good time writing. I feel like most of the time that I'm listening to these people tell me their story. And I'm often as thrilled as I hope you all are when I go, oh, that's what happened. So you keep track of it on a spreadsheet, but I do it at the end. I do it after I've written. I don't let the spreadsheet dictate what I write in the story. I let the spreadsheet tell me at the end what's missing from the story. And that's what the final outline that you end up with will tell you what is missing from your story, and you can fix it. But here's what is really important if you want to write a series. And that is to do a final outline that is accurate, and keep the outline and keep the synopsis. Again, Scrivener, I'm sorry, I know I'm harping on that, but I can print out the synopsis. I can print out the outline. I don't have to write anything. They have functions that just do that. And I keep them, because 4 books in now, but I'm going to 6 books. To remember a minor subplot from book 1 is virtually impossible. Maybe not for you. It's impossible for me. I'm easily confused. So that is very useful. I also buy my own books and on Kindle so that I can do an electronic search on them. Some people load all of their manuscripts into one gigantic document so they can search it. I think it would crash my computer. So I hope that answered the question. If it didn't, shoot me an email.
Thank you so much. That is all the information you've given today is so valuable, so practical. I see somebody is asking if the video will be available to rewatch, and just to answer that, it will be on all the Facebook pages it's being shared live now, or live streamed right now, as well as the library's YouTube page. So we're very happy for that. And let's see, we also have Jean saying it was an excellent presentation.
Thank you, Jean.
And let's see, we have Vicki saying that it's given her so much great information and she'd like to rewatch the video later. So please let us know if Cheril returns. I love her books and can't wait for the 4th in her series.
Well, thank you, Vicki. That's very kind.
I do have one additional question here. It is about revisions and sort of the process of how often to revise. Do you give time, say if you finish a chapter, do you give yourself at least a couple of days before going back, or any kind of tips along those lines?
I tend to revise as I write, but that being said, I'm trying to get away from that to a certain extent. I can revise forever. I can stay in editing process forever, and there is a time where you just have to let it go. And I don't mean you just say it's good enough, because you do want it to be the absolute best that you can. But I will find myself editing things I should have left alone. Is the short end of it. So what I do is I write in early in the morning. I first thing I do is I go back and I read what I wrote the day before, and I make any corrections that are just screaming and staring at me in the face, missing words or misspelled words or whatever. I also, I edit that. So that is the first editing it gets, is the day after it's been written. But then I keep going, because if I stop, the whole momentum of telling the story in that first draft stops. So that's how I get the first draft. I aim for about 80,000 words in my books and my manuscripts. I write very short chapters, so I have usually about 50 short chapters, and it comes out to about 80,000. I usually write considerably more than that and cut it out. It's much easier to overwrite and cut down than it is to come up short on a manuscript and have to add. Because let's think about it. If you've told your story and you have to go back and add to it, you're not adding anything that is integral to the story. And so you don't want to do that. So I don't want to do that. So I overwrite, and then I go back and I cut it down. I do not ever throw anything away. If I cut something out of a manuscript, I put it in a file for future books, for short stories. Everything is usable. I try very hard not to waste my time. Because even though I'm retired now, I don't have a whole lot of time to write. I have a lot more than I used to, but you never have enough. So don't waste it, save it. You can use it somewhere. But anyway, I write the first draft that way. I write almost stream of consciousness. As again, I said, I have an outline that gives me an idea of where I'm going. I write in one morning, I edit that the next morning, and then I write more the next morning. So that's how I do it, go back and forth. I've written the first draft, and I'm usually 8,000 to 10,000 words beyond where I want to be. That is when I do the chart that shows the plot lines, and I see which ones need to come out. And my editor, who is a dear friend, Helen Chappelle, will always send my draft back to me saying, this plot and this plot, these need to come out. And she's always right. So even though I take some out, Miss Helen will always find a couple more to come. I kind of write like I talk, and there's too much of it. Anyway, that is the second draft is done after I have checked all the plots and the subplots. And that I've checked the character placement. And then the third draft is I'm putting that through pro writing. And that is where I'm finding all the overused words, the overused phrases, the places where they say I have too many words, that it's a sticky dialogue. I have an ongoing battle with ProWriting Aid over the passive voice. By the time I have finished that edit in ProWriting Aid, I have usually cut maybe another 5,000 to 6,000 words out. And so that is the third revision, and there may be several other versions, but generally at that point, one more read through after a break of maybe 2 weeks, and then it goes to the editor. And once those changes are made, it goes to beta readers. I have very generous kind of beta readers. And then it goes to a proofreader. So I think I went far afield of your question.
No, that was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And Tara is saying thank you as well, and that the information has been helpful and instructive.
Thank you.
And I think with that, Cheril, we're going to close her out.
Okay.
So thank you very much today for all of the wonderful, informative, and insightful information to help anybody at any stage of becoming an author, and of course at any age. So thank you, Cheril. And I'd like to thank Kelly Phillips again for sponsoring this through the Maryland Writers Association Carroll County Chapter, and also would like to thank Carroll County Public Library for hosting. So thank you for joining us today.